I am
Hang on,
the
hang on.
lead.
We just started him off the back up again.
Okay. I'm Forrest. I'm the lead CLI maintainer for NPM. My main interest in being part of this is twofold. One is to make sure that we can get a smooth integration of new NPM versions into io.js through the build process, and the other is to keep an eye on how io.js decides to solve the Windows continuous integration problem, because that is something that will probably have a material impact on how NPM does things as well.
Cool. Let's go in order here. Johan, is it?
Yep, that's it. Cool. I'm Johan. I work at a small pubs background, and my main interest is integration of all issues and looking at making the hardware suite broader for io.js. And also, I guess, finding interesting ways of making the deploy process smoother.
Awesome. Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken. I am in developer experience at Rackspace. My motivations come from trying to, well, I've wanted to contribute to Node for a long time, but my expertise is more on web app and infra. And so this feels like a great opportunity to get involved and help solve problems, regardless if they're on our cloud or others. I'm also the core maintainer for Package Cloud, which is the Node multi-cloud provisioning library. So I'd love to leverage that if it fits somehow.
Ooh. Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm DevOps at StrongLoop. Build scripts is pretty much my favorite part of software, so that's why I'm here. Hopefully I can help out.
Great. Will.
I'm Will. I'm here on behalf of the Docker Working Group, and I've been dabbling with some of the Docker build containers as well for io.js.
And Will, I work with Will at he's an intern at NodeSource, so we've been working on some ops stuff there together for a while. So I have great respect for Will's skills here. So I'm glad that he's here.
Thank you.
So I'm Rod Vag, Node developer and full stack Node. So my interest here is simply in the same reason that Node Forward existed and now io.js, which is to put Node back on track, to reinvigorate the ecosystem and the community, get people excited about Node again, get releases happening, get up to date with JavaScript as it evolves through V8, and perhaps even beyond V8. And just using my skills, at systems level stuff to get build going. I don't consider myself, an expert in any way in any of these things, and I'm more than happy to defer to expertise that comes up. So at the moment, I've been shouldering most of the build effort, and I'm keen to explore ways to offload some of that to people who are, equally or more able than me to do that. So I've had a busy morning and am not really up to speed with what we're going to talk about, so I'm just going to open up the issue now and back up to some of the agenda items that I suggested. I'm really happy this group's got together. This particular collection, I think, is a fantastic start, and I'm more than happy to say that this is the initial build working group, this group here, and go from there. As per the working group spec in the io.js repo, we had to. What do we have to do? The governance bootstrap stuff. We haven't really done, even though we were the first working group that existed. It was really just me and a bit of Will and a bit of Ryan Stevens from NodeSource, who's not on this call and probably doesn't have the time to participate anyway. So we need to set up a, if you have a look at the working group doc, there's a whole lot of stuff you need to take on board, like how to do process stuff, how to do governance of the working group, meetings, is there a consensus seeking process or whatever. I'm not sure there's much that's controversial in there, and we can just sort of either copy what the website group's done or streams, or just copy the Bootstrap governance thing from there. I'm happy to do the consensus-seeking model. I think hopefully everyone else is happy for a model whereby we try and reach consensus through discussion, but if all else fails, fall back to a voting situation. I think that model works well enough. I'm comfortable with that. By the way, feel free to buddy when I'm rambling here if you have anything to add. So I think one of us needs to volunteer to pull request in some working group docs to the build repo, like the streams and website group have got, and then we can go from there. We can probably have a discussion in a pull request about that. Does anyone want to volunteer for that, by the way? Or I mean, I can put it on my list if need be, or if anyone else is particularly passionate about this stuff, you should take it.
I'm still trying to find the docs.
So if you go to issue number 43 in build, there's actually a link in the initial comment there, and there's dot points down the bottom of the big comment.
Yeah, I see it.
There's a link to workinggroups.md, and down the bottom of that is the working group bootstrapping process that I'm talking about.
I just linked it in the Hangout chat as well.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Right, and if you go to the website repo, you'll see that they have a contributing.md and a governance.md doc, which are basically what we need to do. But it's this sort of the detailed governance stuff that you know. Out of all the things that I'm willing to let slip, that's one of them. When I get too busy. So if someone else wants to put up their hand, that's great. Otherwise, I'll just put it on my list.
I'll throw in my hat if nobody's too excited about it.
It sounds like nobody's too excited about it.
I've had similar discussions with other people about different working group stuff. So
Looks like
yeah,
mostly
some people get excited about this, some people don't.
Do we have an issue to capture this work, Rod?
I was thinking about actually. Well, I've got the document. There's a so disorganized. There's second last comment in the issue number 43 was it had a link to a Google Doc that is open for anyone to edit, and that was going to be for minutes for this meeting. Looks like I should have it already. Man, let me just jot down names here. So first item was governance. And we're going to take Bootstrap from there. And so, okay, Will's going to volunteer for that. Next item. Okay, build versus Docker. So the interesting thing about this working group is that we have roles that span beyond just what you would think of when you think of build. And the one at the moment is the Docker group, specifically the guys that are handling the official io.js Docker repo, which is if you do a Docker pull io.js, you'll get their work coming from the doc-io.js repo. Now they're falling under the build project for the moment, but the work that they're doing, I don't see as it's best if they do that work and they have their own process to decide how to do that. And mostly, it looks like it'll probably just be a matter of discussing in pull requests. And I'm not interested in intervening there and telling them how better to do things because I consider that group of people to be more expert in that. Yet they still fall underneath the purview of build. So we need to think about how that relationship forms. The other one I see is, and we had talked about it briefly in the TC meeting this morning, was there will likely be either a performance working group or a performance sub-working group of build. Where we are responsible for helping maintain hardware for for benchmarking, but there is a group of people that is dedicated to maintaining benchmarks, to coming up with ways of presenting those numbers, and that's performancey stuff. And I don't see that as work that is particularly relevant to the sort of parent build working group. So we need to have some sort of relationship with the activities of what this group does that doesn't step on people's skills and abilities, and gives them the freedom to do what they want, but also keeps them within this collection of build. I don't know exactly what I'm suggesting here for a way forward, but simply to highlight that this is something that we have within this working group. Anybody interested in commenting on that, or we don't have to come to any
clarifying comment and/or question? Is it identify the arrangement of the working groups as a function of the broader build working group?
You mean, sorry, you're asking me to identify the function, or you want to?
I'm trying to figure out how to restate the broader comment that you made, which is our challenge to identify the subgroups of the build group or potential peer groups like performance, or I'm a little confused what we're trying to solve.
Sorry, well, I'm not sure we're trying to solve anything. It's simply that going forward, we need to make sure that the group is flexible enough to allow these different activities to occur, but be self-contained. So Docker is the obvious one because it's already happening. They come under the the build working group is responsible for what they do. Yet what they do is fairly self-contained.
It's like an independent sub-working group. I think the only, for the Docker working group, it's pretty much a small scale project with the work being done there is awesome, and they're working directly with the core maintainers of the Docker project. But I think the only thing that really should extend in that working group is the code of conduct and behavior on the pull requests, how people interact. But beyond that, it should, for the most part, be independent. Am I mistaken, or?
I think you're right.
Do the working groups need independent codes of conduct, or are they just under the aegis of the io.js code of conduct?
That's what I was suggesting, is that it just be under that code of conduct of the project.
Okay.
So the way the working groups set the structure is that each working group should adopt its own code of conduct along with other governance docs. So whether that's just inheriting the parent code of conduct or coming up with something new is up to the working group. So we can just inherit that if we want to, and then the sub-work groups can inherit that too. But most importantly, I think, is simply giving these subgroups the ability to act relatively autonomously, but also be able to plug into the resources that build has. So perhaps that means having these meetings that includes everybody, or perhaps it means letting everyone have separate meetings. I mean, I'm not asking for a clarification here. I'm just sort of stating this as something that we need to figure out over time.
Yeah, that's why I kind of raised scope as one of the bullets on the agenda. For me personally, I feel it's not confusing, but it's somewhat unclear what the responsibilities are of this group. I don't think we need to define it initially. I think that'll just pan itself out as we move along and find problems to actually solve.
That's true. Yeah. So I think the scope is largely going to be skills based. This group of people is going to be good at solving particular kinds of problems, and we will expand our scope to include those problems as people come to us for help, particularly. So at the moment, build is concerned with test infrastructure, maintaining that, also contributing to that. So I've been contributing mostly back to test infrastructure, test code back into the io.js repo, just because that comes under sort of build responsibility. Doing releases is part of our responsibility. So maintaining the infrastructure to do that and the process for that, facilitating the process for that. And then there's these other things. Docker and performance will likely become part of the scope of this as well. but doing that in a way that doesn't make it unwieldy, I think, is the trick. I'm just going to make some notes here about scope. I'm sorry, I know this is kind of vague, but it's just something I wanted to raise. Okay, so the next thing I had in my list was the roadmap items.
Where will I find that?
So that's the top of issue number 43 in my big comment. So I'll just paste in that block into the doc. And this is mainly for discussion purposes at this stage. I don't see that we need to resolve anything here.
So before we move on, real quick, on the governance models, do we need to open a pull request on each repository for the working group? So build or /build /docker or /docker io.js, or just the build repository?
My suggestion would be to open a pull request against the build repo and then flag it in Docker, and also in build containers is the other one that we've got going. Just make an issue there and then point back to the pull request and say that those things will be merged into those repos as well when accepted. So roadmap items come largely from original goals of this group. When we were doing Node Forward, it was we came up with ideas, and then it largely found the issues on the build repo still. That was inherited from Node Forward. So these are items that we sort of want to get to over time, given people resources and also infrastructure. So the things that I jotted down were making progress towards automatic testing of pull requests to both io.js and libuv. And we were having a discussion in gitter.im recently, just a couple of hours ago, about how this would work and potentially expanding that beyond just containers in the Linux sense. So the idea is to every pull request that goes into the io.js repo, we want to be tested on CI somewhere. So we have this Jenkins job already, which is io.js any PR containers, I think it's called. So you can actually run that job, and it will take any branch of any forked io.js repo and run. It'll do a compile and a full test in Linux containers across stable versions or supported versions of Ubuntu and also Debian. So the idea there is to make that automatic, so that when the pull request comes in, the system is notified by it. It runs those jobs and reports back to GitHub, so that you get the nice little status indicator on GitHub pull requests whether something's passed or not. And then they can give the person feedback so that they can make it pass. But that only gives us Linux coverage on those pull requests. There's potential to expand it to other systems that have containers. So FreeBSD has jails, Solaris has zones. Neither of those are particularly helpful at this stage. It would be much more helpful to be able to do them on Windows and OS X, but both of those are problematic with regard to containerization. So you basically have to have temporary infrastructure that you can run and then kill and then start up in a fresh state again. Because the risk here is if we do an automatic run for any pull request, then you are basically allowing arbitrary code to run on the test infrastructure, which we don't want to happen. So you either need somebody's eyes on what's being run, or you need to be able to protect it within a containerized environment. So progress towards that, and possibly expanding it out to maybe a temporary Windows machine, so that we can do it there as well. automatic testing of merged commits via full CI build set. So whenever something is merged into the head branch, we do a full CI, so all the platforms we support, and then report that back to the repo. So maybe have a badge on the repo, so that it can say this is passed on all these platforms. Also in that was actually to back up on the first issue, we should be able to do automatic full set CI on pull requests from people with commit bits, so all of the collaborators. They should be considered trusted, so we just run their PRs automatically. So there's two different levels of automation there. Then the easier test triggers for both io.js and libuv collaborators, so they can request CI runs for any of their forks or other forks, so that they can just do it arbitrarily. You don't have to do a PR to get this to happen automatically. You either log into Jenkins or you have. I think the way that Joy Node has been doing it, maybe still is doing it. There's, I think TJ wrote a Chrome plugin, and so in Chrome, if you're on a PR, you can you click a button or something, and it tells Jenkins to do a build of that pull request. I don't know if that's still in play, and I'm not sure that's really an ideal mechanism. It'd be nice to have some nice mechanism for collaborators to do it that doesn't involve logging into Jenkins or that kind of garbage. And then longer term discussions, things that we've discussed a lot in the build repo over time is replacing Jenkins with our own solution. Nobody likes Jenkins. BuildBot is not that great either. Everything's terrible in this ecosystem. So let's make something awesome that particularly fits our needs as well, and then can potentially expand to other use cases. So I did start work on that. I've got some code on my computer that's nowhere near. I'm not really willing to even share that at this stage. But that's I think that where we landed was let's use Jenkins to get it going, and perhaps replace parts of Jenkins over time until we get to the point where we've got something better.
The NPM solution to this right now is just conceding to the grim reality that there is no road that does not go through Jenkins for Windows. We're still capable of leaning on Travis for most of what we need for NPM itself, but we don't have a good solution for either OS X, which is actually fine because we all do our development in OS X, and Windows, which is not fine because everything about Windows is terrible forever. I've kind of tentatively looked at building something a little more bespoke, but like the infinite bike shed yak shave alarm goes off as soon as I start looking at that. And as much as Jenkins is terrible, it's still, I think, the best bet.
Yeah, well, that's what we're betting with now. But I think there's also potential fun to be had there, and I think from some of your comments, the people in here on the repo, it sounds like this is going to be a fun challenge for a few of us to get stuck into, even if it is an infinite bike shed. It's still a fun bike shed for some of us. So that would be a nice longer term plan to have, because that's a stated goal, but whether we get there, I think we need to be realistic. Maybe that's going to be a hard road. So that's my roadmap items that came to the top of my head. Anyone else want to add ideas to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add one. It's slightly orthogonal to the build stuff. I added under the scope the website infra. I have a particular belief that all websites for any internet-facing property should be HA and be able to be resilient to outages or deployments or any number of modern web things. And I'd really like to see our infra, at least on the website, kind of meet that expectation that it's behind a load balancer and has multiple web heads and can do zero downtime deploys and CDN and all the good stuff that I think we expect with modern web apps.
We had a good discussion on Gitter about this as well. One of the complications is the tarball downloads. We're trying to mirror the Node.js.org structure. So if we were to go for a CDN, then we have to make sure that it's smooth for people that are predicting the same pattern for downloads, like Node version managers, for example. And also Node.js is another one as well. But I think I'm in agreement, Ken, that that'd be a great thing to have on the roadmap.
The site's completely static, right?
It is.
Yeah.
So and that's another thing that we need to, like, there will be ongoing discussions between this group and the website group. I expect at some point they will likely want to have the build process performed on the server on deploy rather than having to check stuff into their repo all the time. Maybe not. I mean, Michael's on that team, so he likes checking stuff into repos, so maybe not. But we will want to consider how to facilitate that if that's what they want in a safe and predictable way. But yeah, it's just we clone the repo, serve it with Nginx. The release stuff is a little bit more complicated, but it's still ultimately static. Yeah.
So let me ask a clarifying question there. Is it the website's working group's responsibility to handle like the docs integration from the core repo and the releases, or is that our responsibility to pull all that together?
So docs, so all that does is that comes from one of the build bots that it uploads a docs directory and to the each release directory. If you look in dist or downloads, you'll see each release has a docs directory, and we have a symlink for when you got it's a symlink to latest. So
right. Okay.
And so when you go to io.js.org/API, that's a Nginx alias for /dist/latest/docs. So that's actually just happens as part of the build process. I don't particularly want us to be concerned with the docs themselves, and I think the website group is probably taking responsibility for docs. We're just there to facilitate their publishing.
Right, but that is the copying of that's in the releases in the dist is what you're saying, or the downloads rather. Yes.
So
and it's an Nginx config that lives in our repo that handles that. I'm just trying to build a mental model of how these different pieces fit together.
Yeah, so tomorrow there will be a 1.3.0 release, and as part of that release, so I'll be doing the release, and when I promote the builds, they will go into the dist directory, and there'll be a symlink created for the latest symlink will be deleted and point to 1.3.0, and then Nginx will then start serving the pages in the docs directory as /API. So that's how we serve the docs. That's the process so far, and that actually mirrors how Node.js.org does it too. So each release introduces a new docs directory that gets served as /API.
Thank you.
I also don't see, like, there's been a desire to mirror the way Node.js.org does it, but I absolutely see it within what we're doing with io.js.org to find better ways of doing things. So I'm more than happy to throw things out and do them a better way if we can find a smooth path for users. That's all. I thought of another one to add. That just slipped my mind.
Sorry, guys,
for a moment,
I dropped out for a sec.
Did you miss much there? Sorry. You didn't want us to repeat anything there, Johan?
Well, how does he know what to repeat if he wasn't here to hear it?
How many minutes was in your web? No, it's okay. We're just talking about the website. So an item that I wanted to add as well was this idea that we could provide a service to the broader ecosystem to provide pre-built binaries for native add-ons. So it's particularly painful in Windows, which is unfortunately the hardest platform to solve the problem on from an infrastructure side. But the idea is that already there's a lot of add-ons are using Node pre-jip to do this, where whenever they publish a new version, they go through and manually create binaries. Some of them are using Travis, some of them are using AppVeyor, and a few other solutions to come up with the tarballs and binaries for these things. Then they serve them via S3 or some other means. And I think its package JSON has some data in it that says where the tarballs are located. And if you do an npm install of a package that's a native add-on, Node pre-jip will run before Node jip is invoked. to try and download the build directory for that add-on, and that will potentially remove the need to run Node.js at all. So what would be really nice is if we could provide that as a service for add-ons, so that potentially, if you're on Windows, you never even need to install a compiler to do any Node, and you can use native add-ons, and everything's just compiled for you for the version you want. That's a lofty goal, perhaps, but it'd be really nice if we could think about that as part of the roadmap for this group. And I think NPM would probably like that too.
I think everyone would. Anyone who has to talk to the customers.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to say, it's a Linux
Or
user, I
sit
don't care,
beside
but-
anyone who has to talk to customers.
Yeah, and answering GitHub issues from Windows users that say, how do I install this?
I have another one. I don't know if it's how broad. I'll articulate it. Similar to what I said about the web app being modern, I think all of our infra should be deterministic. We should be able to describe it in Ansible or whatever the configuration and provisioning framework of choice. But the idea that it's all deterministic and we're not setting up machines by hand and trusting that they'll always be there, but rather all of our test infra can be described through one of these tools. Like I like Ansible quite a lot. I'm not a pro at it, but if we ever have outages or we need to switch providers, it should be comparatively trivial for us to move all of that infra to a new provider. And I think we've got some of that, but I don't know how far along that path we are.
So it's pretty complete for everything we're running on Linux. So all of the test and release machines and even the website, it's all Ansibleized. All that's missing is probably some keys, is like SSL keys for the website and other things. So it's just secrets that are missing from them. What's lacking is Windows. Windows is documented as dot points in the repo of how to set up a Windows machine, and OS X is exactly the same boat. I'm not sure. I don't think I've actually put the documentation up there, but I have it to put up. It's a bit more simple than Windows, but it's still the same thing. So I mean, I don't know how to do that stuff for Windows or Mac.
So I want to clarify a little bit. I noticed that the configuration is pretty well done. It looks, but not the provisioning, right? And so it seems as though all of the assets, specifically the servers, are effectively hard-coded in the READMEs, and it's not, I think, prohibitively difficult to be able to derive that on the fly through Ansible and have it all be deterministic instead of hard-coded, such that if we want to have more resources or switch providers, it's not requiring going in and having everybody change their SSH configs to point to different hosts.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd like somebody else to help work towards that. So at the moment, it's just sort of make it work, get going. But yeah, it would be nice to extend that back into provisioning as well.
I think Ken volunteered for that.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I'll probably want to take a crack at that in infinite amounts of time.
Yeah. So at the moment, we run all our Linux machines on DigitalOcean, and we run all our Windows machines on Rackspace. We have ARM machines that are beside me, and somebody sent me a new Raspberry Pi just yesterday. So I'll hook that up too. So ARM is sort of in my office. There's also online.net, cloud.online.net are very interested in helping out. There's some discussion in the repo. I think it may be in issue number 43. Yeah, there's a discussion in there with them. They have been hooked up to CI before on Jenkins. So I have been running stuff on them before for ARM v7, but speed was a problem there. But we may be able to fix that. There's also either way, I'm not aware of ARM v6 hardware that we can use on cloud, so we're going to have to run physical stuff. FreeBSD is provided by Voxer. They're interested in providing the hardware for that. Even though DigitalOcean have Voxer machines, and Michael said, "Oh, you should use them." Vox has stepped up at the beginning to provide that, and they've actually given us some non-virtualized machines, so it's nice and fast. And Fedora is responsible for sort of keeping FreeBSD updated on the codebase, so that's sort of in the Voxer box. OS X, same thing. We talked to Voxer earlier, and they were interested in providing hardware for that, so they actually bought 2 Mac Minis for us that are located in the data center that are behind their firewall. So I have a VPN access to get into there and run those machines. Now what I'm running on those machines, those 2 Mac Minis, I'm actually running virtual machines on them. So I've got 2 virtual machines on them, on each of them. One is for test and one is for release. And so the test ones are redundant, so one can go down and the other one will just take over. But the release ones are actually used specifically, so we use one of them to build the PKG files for Mac installers, and the other one we use to do the source tarballs and documentation and the Darwin tarballs, so the binary tarballs for OS X. So that's how we're using them at the moment. So that's the current state of our infrastructure. Provisioning that automatically is kind of crazy. So scripting some of it with Ansible is fine. I did poke around at Ansible for Windows, but I'm really not sure that's practical at all. But Ken, maybe you've got more experience in that.
I also didn't realize we had so many special case hardwares.
And we're going to get more. There's been a call for Solaris of some kind. We may end up getting Joint on board and getting some SmartOS machines, but there's also a call for Walmart in particular are wanting Illumo. How do you say it? IllumoS.
I think so.
That one is. So they're interested in testing on that. So if companies come along that are interested in running hardware and supporting the source code for that hardware, for that architecture, then we should be at least willing to explore the possibility of pulling that into our CI set. My only concern is going back to a place where the original Node project was, where when they had a Jenkins set up, they sort of, anyone that wanted to throw a box at it could just throw a box at it from their house, and that would be it. I'd like all of the hardware that we're running stuff on to be under the control of this group, so that we have access to those machines in some way, whether it's individuals via VPN access or it's in your offices, like I've got ARM in mind, things like that. So not just any old person throwing resources at this project. If they're going to throw resources, then they should physically send them to us or pay for something online. That's my suggestion anyway. Okay, so that's roadmap stuff. What I might do with that is actually put my hand up to pull request in a roadmap document that documents some of this stuff, just briefly at least, things that we want to head towards. Okay. The next thing was sort of overlapping there, which was list of platforms. We sort of discussed that, so I'm not sure there's much more to discuss. I'll paste in what I had in the issue. So I've given you a rundown of the platforms we currently support. If you have a look at the README for build, I think it's still the original README. Who was commenting on that? Was it you, Ryan? Oh no, it was Johan.
Yeah,
but
it was from Billbot.
Sorry, the README is old. It dates back to the original Blue Sky Node Forward, what we wanted to do, and it's got a list of supported platforms on it, which is out of date. So specifically, we can't support some of the Windows stuff. So 2012 Visual Studio doesn't work with what we're doing. We haven't got OS X 8 or 10.8 or 10.9 set up. We've only got 10.10. I think that's the latest one, isn't it? Sounds right. Because of the difficulty in getting images, legally and safely that you can use for those things on virtual machines, so we can't just, buy new hardware and then run old operating systems on it unless you've got the source, an install disk, and I think it's both 10.8 and 10.9 that didn't come with install disks. You have to get them from the App Store or from the hardware you bought it with. So we're not running that in our CI set, which is kind of annoying and unfortunate. I have thought about uploading an image to one of the servers, or the Voxer servers that we've got for, I think I've got 10.9 locally, but I don't know. That's a whole anyway. We're running all of the CentOS. We're actually going back to 5. So CentOS 5, 6, and 7 we're already running. So that gives us support for all of the enterprise Linux releases that are supported out there. So RHEL 5, 6, and 7, and even Oracle Linux, Scientific Linux, that mob. So we've got good coverage there. All of the Ubuntu LTS releases are covered, plus also 14.10, which is currently supported. We're bringing that too. We don't have a full mix of 64 and 32-bit across all of these, but we've got a bit of a mix. So, for example, we've got 64 and 32 on Ubuntu Lucid, that's 10.04, and we've got the same on 14.04, but we don't have it on 12.04 because it just seems like just way too much hardware for not much gain. We don't have SmartOS or any Solaris variant. And our ARM support is a little bit patchy, which is the next item on the agenda. Down the bottom of the README, you'll see we have FreeBSD on the list. We have FreeBSD in CI, and I think we have 32-bit and 64-bit FreeBSD 10. We don't have 9, but I believe 9 is still being supported. The fact that the tests don't pass on FreeBSD 10 suggests that we don't put too much effort into that until the core team get that fixed. MinGW was requested by libuv because apparently they have a lot of users. Well, they have some users on MinGW who complain every time that they break support there. I don't know how much work we want to put into supporting that right now. And on the topic of libuv, we do actually have some slightly different libuv setups for them that we don't run with io.js, particularly older versions of GCC. We run on the libuv that don't support io.js. We could do the same thing for Windows. I'll run older Windows with older Visual Studio. We just haven't had requests for that, and I think also they're in a situation of, because the test infrastructure is not tightly integrated with their processes, that it's not as apparent to them when stuff's broken. They just run the tests occasionally for pull requests and for master just to see what's broken, and they've got lots of tests breaking, and it's just part of how things are now. And I think over time, as it becomes part of their development process, they'll probably want to expand the list more. On the list as well, we had Power8, but I think that's that shouldn't be on there because that's the IBM thing. That's actually they've got maintaining their own fork of V8 and Node for that, and we may want to talk to them in the future. They talked to us initially before the io.js split, and that's why it's on the list here. But they're struggling just to keep up with Giant Node, let alone io.js. With their fork, but that may be something we want to consider in the future, bringing them on board.
I was thinking about a thing. Sorry. Regarding, you go.
I was going to say that the Power8 stuff, I think they're hoping to upstream
to V8 or to
both. I think.
Okay, cool.
I think
know they're putting a lot of resources into it.
Okay, so what I was trying to say was that I've been tinkering a lot with both Node and io.js in terms of different configurations, shared builds, different third-party libraries, and every now and then stuff breaks. I guess the latest thing was the C-Aries dependent have a slightly modified API, which wasn't upstreamed, so we removed that. But I think we might want to have a buildbot that runs shared versions against specific systems if we want to support it.
That's a good point. Yeah, we don't go much into alternative configurations or even alternative build types. Like they're all release builds. There's no debug builds that we're doing on any of these. So there's a whole lot of permutations we could include, but there's so many that we have to prioritize, I think. But that's the role for this group anyway.
And you mentioned 32-bit platforms. If memory serves correctly, if we're wanting to use Docker for containerizing these builds, Docker still doesn't run on 32-bit, or at least it's not supported. I'm not sure if we can get it to run.
Not officially supported, but Docker even runs on ARM if you try.
Oh, fair enough.
Which is 32-bit, or 32-bit. Okay, so that's the list of platforms. I think it's on me to update the README to say what the current list of platforms is, and then we need some way of, whether it's just pull requests or issues, of being able to discuss new platforms and permutations of builds and architectures. I'm not sure what the best way to do that is, other than simply asking people to file issues for the discussion.
I have some computers at my office running a bit more exotic hardware as well, or software, sorry, like OpenBSD. I have a few Illumos things and SmartOS, but I don't know how optimal the entire situation with running too much in your back room is. So it's something. I mean, I can add it to a list and pull it to the Jenkins setup, but if we have hardware available, that would probably be a better solution.
The rule I think that io.js is adopting for hardware support is that to support a platform, there has to be somebody willing to fix bugs and maintain it. So it wouldn't be worth pulling in OpenBSD if there was nobody actually going to contribute code to make it work and keep it up to date. Same with Solaris. Like there's been literally one issue on io.js repo about Solaris. Beyond Joyent, I'm not sure how many people really care that much. So if people step up and want to help out, then we'll go after hardware, whether they provide it or we need to go out and find it. So that goes to your point of having those machines. If you care about OpenBSD as part of the build team, then perhaps it's fine to plug that into the CI.
I personally agree totally that. I mean, I'm not in a position where I want to support it, but just raising visibility in terms of test failures, which is the most common thing I see failing, like different tests for. But it kind of falls down to libuv as well. So I think the bigger problem is like working on libuv from a supported platform point of view.
Yeah, that's a lot of work in libuv to get their tests passing across all these platforms. If you have a look through Jenkins, you'll see how crazy it is at the moment. Their tests are not stable. We've actually put since forking Node, we've put a lot of work into stabilizing the test suite and making things pass consistently, and it's working really well. But libuv needs to go through that process too, and I think part of that is going to be helping them with the visibility, like you said. So give them a badge on their repo that just is red to make them fix it. Okay, so the other thing on my list was ARM, and I had a big spiel on the issue about ARM. So the thing about ARM is that lots of people use Node on ARM, and it's very popular on all sorts of ARM hardware. And ARM is only going to become more popular as a primary platform for people to use. So I think it's really important that io.js considers ARM as a first-class citizen. So far, we've been doing that. We've certainly been doing it much better than Joyent Node has ever done it. It's been an afterthought the whole time, with releases regularly breaking on ARM. So the situation as it is now is we have two original Raspberry Pi, I think they're B+, running in the CI set, and we have one, and so Raspberry Pi is ARM V6, and we have an ARM V7 in the form of it's an Odroid XU3, which is a neat little box. It's even got a fan on it because it's so beefy. So it builds the ARM V7, tests and runs the tests, and it also does it puts the stuff into the distribution for ARM V7. The Raspberry Pis share the responsibility of test and build. So they're sitting next to me. I have another Raspberry Pi put into the mix just to help share the load a bit. The way we do it to make them reasonably fast is we use CC cache. So when GCC runs, it actually looks up if that particular build file and configuration has been run before. If it has, then it'll grab an object file from this cache directory and then dump it in. So it actually, you can build pretty fast when you've got it set up well. So sometimes the ARM builds actually go quicker than the other builds, which is nice. The tests take a long time, and the Raspberry Pi tests for ARM v6 are so slow that we get about 12 consistent failures because of timeouts. I'd like us to add the new Raspberry Pi to the mix because people are going to be using that. I'd also like us to seek input from the community about the popular platforms that people are using, like BeagleBone Black is very popular, and then ask for people to donate hardware that we can put into the mix. I'd also like us to be able to eventually put ARM v8 in there so that people can run it on newer Chromebooks and when we get fancy hardware being released with ARM v8. And 64-bit ARM would be awesome too. But that's not. I don't think there's any reasonable platforms to use for that. So that's ARM, and I think my proposal for a way forward there is to simply come up with a call for donations from the community for hardware that they're using. Yeah, sorry, I can't.
So it seems to me that things like BeagleBoard, Tessel, Raspberry, it's in the incentive of the manufacturers of those devices to help us make I/O good on those devices, because they'll sell more devices. And so rather than looking for individuals to donate, why don't we reach out to these companies directly and say, it's critical for us to have I/O running on these platforms. Can you help? I mean, we're talking a couple devices, right? How many devices are we talking?
Probably 2 as a minimum.
I mean, that's a write-off for their developer experience or equivalent teams, whatever their outreach teams are.
Yeah, it's a matter of getting in contact with the right people and getting their attention, making them care, I think, is the trick.
Yeah, isn't most of these devices close to the cost for a lunch?
Seriously, like it's comical.
Yeah.
But we need to connect that with the reality of how people are using it. So we don't want to just go after a platform because it's interesting to us. We need to make sure that people are actually using it at their NodeBots events or whatever. So the obvious one is BeagleBone, BeagleBoard, whatever they're called. That they're actually used quite a lot, those things, and our builds for ARM v6 don't actually run on the default operating system because actually ARM v7 because we're building on a newer version of Ubuntu, which has a newer glibc. So we need to be able to support their operating system. But to do that, we've got to run their operating system, which sort of only runs on that hardware. So that's kind of annoying. So if somebody wants to volunteer to go out to these companies, that's fine. I know I already have we've already started talking to Tessel. Tessel are interested in io.js and would probably be keen to commit hardware, and I'd like to encourage them to commit hardware to the CI for whatever their next-gen platform will be. That would be cool. But others, I mean, if you guys have connections, that's great, but no, that's fine. The trick, I think the real trick at this stage is getting the feedback from the community about what platforms they care about, and then maybe asking them to help connect to the manufacturers. So that's probably a good point to put to the BeagleBone people to say, how about you go and talk to them and get them to contribute hardware, and see if we can do that. Okay. So I'm going to put in a task for me is to put a pull request in for a call for comment and contributions on ARM hardware and software configurations. So that was all from my items. Does anyone else want to discuss something in particular? Okay, and the other thing I wanted to discuss was access. So at the moment, I'm pretty much, I think, the sole keeper of access to all of these machines, and that's not really optimal. There's a couple of cases where the access will have to be limited to a certain number of people. Like the Voxer machines, we have trust with Voxer, and we probably just can't share access to their VPN behind their firewall for everyone that we think is safe without them vetting it first. I need to limit access to the Windows machine and the OS X machine that has signing keys on it, because they're currently node source signing keys. Just want to keep them a bit limited. Like to keep the access relatively limited to machines that do release builds, just because they're a bit more sensitive. If we're throwing tarballs out there for people to use, we've just got to be careful with the security of the machine that they're produced on. But apart from that, I think that getting more people access to the machines that run tests is a top priority. So I'd like to be able to share, I don't know, probably all of this group I'd be willing to share access to that if you're interested in being able to help with keeping those machines up, maintaining them, reprovisioning them, whatever else is needed.
I guess one good start would be make sure we at least have a redundancy for every machine. So even if it's a limited access machine, we at least have two people always having access to it.
Yep.
So if you start by like every hardware has at least two people on it, then we can kind of grow from there.
Right.
I hate to dive out, but I have a hard stop at 5. So I just wanted to say thanks to Rod for pulling me in, and I hope to see everyone next week.
Okay, sorry it hasn't been so organised and focused, but perhaps we'll try and pull together a more focused agenda next time.
Great, thanks guys. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah.
All right.
So maybe I'll make an issue to talk about access.
Yes.
For infrastructure, is there any infrastructure as part of io.js that isn't under this working group? Or you? I mean?
No. So the bus factor for io.js infrastructure is 1 at the moment. So that's just the nature of it. We did have, so Ryan Stevens from NodeSource was helping me initially, but he's been too occupied with other things. And we've got Will here who's with us on at NodeSource, and I'm happy to share some of the more secure stuff like the Voxer access, which they've trusted to NodeSource, and also NodeSource signing key stuff. And actually SSL cert for the Jenkins machine is NodeSource's wildcard one as well, so I've got to be careful with that. But beyond that, we can be more flexible. Actually, one thing that I didn't cover was NPM. I know, Forrest, you're here. You're probably more interested in NPM than anything else. I did set up a Jenkins run, a job for NPM tests only. So it does a clone and it runs make test in NPM, and also the Windows side as well. It does the same thing. I haven't. The
Windows tests don't pass completely right now, and it's going to be probably a multi-month process of getting them all working. The Unix and OS X tests and everything else should pass just fine, unless you have Couch installed, in which case there's an HTTP agent bug that only gets hit when you're talking to Couch. So those should be safe to run on every platform except for Windows, unless you have Couch installed.
So my idea here was to make this separate job that does test NPM, and let you have free reign to run that and do whatever you want with, point to whatever repo you want to get it right. Just for you to be able to get it up to speed. Do you have extensive test infrastructure at NPM, or is this duplicating effort?
Depends on how extensive you think my laptop is.
Okay, so this is going to be helpful.
So like I said, we're leaning pretty heavily on Travis right now. We have Travis tests running for 0.8, 0.10, Node.js, 0.12, and io.js, whatever the latest io.js is. The sole chunk of infrastructure that I think we're mostly interested in running and maintaining for ourselves is Windows, because Windows is very important to NPM, and Windows is just different, and it doesn't look like any of the popular SaaS stuff that supports Node for CI is going to add Windows support anytime soon.
Yep. So hopefully then having access to this, because it runs across the full set of platforms that we have for io.js. Hopefully you having access to that will help with that work.
Yeah, I will definitely try to set aside some time to get that up and running, and I think it is totally sensible to do it as a separate task, at least for now.
Yep. There was a segue there. And, so I've had 3 hours sleep last night. That's why I'm also a bit scattered. Yeah, oh, that's right. So I have a file on my computer with a list of about 10 or 15 usernames and passwords for Jenkins that I need to send out to io.js collaborators and as well you, Forrest, and I probably should do the rest of you guys here if you don't already have access. So that's Travis' usernames and passwords to be able to run any of the jobs. The blocker on that was getting that document that I put in a pull request. The latest pull request to build was I need to get a document that describes what's available there and what the sensitive bits are. So it's the password, the username password is just to log in to run any of the jobs. I didn't want to make it too fine-grained and complicated, but it also means you can run like release builds, you can run libuv builds, but people should just know to stick to the basic ones that they need to care about. So that's what that document was for. I need to get that finished, and then I need to send out these credentials to everyone to be able to use it. Because at the moment we're just using plain Jenkins credentials. You can hook it up to GitHub orgs, and I've had a bit of a play with that, but I'm not sure that that's worth going to the effort of that. So just at the moment, usernames and passwords are what I've done. So that's on my list of things to do. It was supposed to be done over a week ago, but it'll get there, and you guys will get passwords and usernames soon.
Are the Jenkins jobs stored anywhere other than Jenkins?
No, and that's another thing. It's totally like that's a big hole in our documentation scriptability. That the configurations are kind of complex for some of them, where we've had to sort of make up for deficiencies in the make tasks and also the Windows builds. So there's a lot of config in Jenkins that is, if we lost that, that would be kind of annoying. So that's another task that it'd be great if somebody could tackle for exporting that or documenting it at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's all from me. Thanks, guys, for coming and hearing me ramble. I'll add you to the io.js build group. I'll put a PR for the meeting minutes, and we'll try and come up with a bit more organised agenda for next time, and maybe we can meet in not next week, but I don't know how frequently we want to meet. Every couple of weeks, once a month, I don't know. Yeah,
I think the working group charter says every week, so we might want to edit that as well and just say, whenever.
I think as needed is good. Just
yeah, there is a risk in as needed that never gets done, but it may never need to be done. Like we're discussing putting Nan into io.js, and one of the things that we were discussing there is that none of us actually want to have meetings to talk about Nan. We do it all quite well on the repo, so we're going to edit that out of the working group thing. Okay. Well, let's talk about it on GitHub and come up with an agenda for next time, and hopefully we can make progress. Please feel free to bug me if I'm not doing things that I've said I'm going to do. I've just got so much on my plate that things kind of fall off regularly.
Thanks for putting this together, Rod. It's good to see what's going.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully we can make it a little easier for you.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to people bringing their new skills to this that sort of level us up from where we are. We're already out of the gate. We're already in a much better position than Joy at Node in terms of test coverage, platform coverage, and ARM coverage in particular. And I think that we can only improve and get better and better. And it'll ultimately be better for the Node ecosystem as a whole. So good stuff. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks. I'll see you shortly again, I guess.